Hey everyone, I'm Ann Lewis. I am the team lead for MacroBlitz, and in this presentation, we are going to talk about how to gear up for MacroBlitz. As a result of watching this presentation, you will know the 7 different kinds of gear recommended for MacroBlitz, and you will understand how MacroBlitz does not have required gear. Let's start with that second learning objective first, the recommended versus required gear. So, to understand that, you need to understand our study design question. What kinds of macroinvertebrates do you find when you churn and turn rocks in a stream or jab the vegetation and top layer of sediment with a net in a pond, wetland, or lakeshore? So, essentially, what we're asking is what do you find when you stick a net in the water and poke it around some rocks or jab it through some vegetation? That's what we want to know. And we want to get a lot of people out doing this. And so, in order to do this, we need to make this as accessible as possible. So, one of the reasons MacroBlitz does not require gear is because our priority is accessibility. We also don't require gear because we don't have a minimum sample size. So, we don't need something like a kick net. We don't require gear because we're working at a really large geographic scale. From 2024, it is from Canada down to Patagonia. Lots of communities that have access to lots of different kinds of gear. They need to use what they can get access to and what works best for them. We don't require gear because we're working in multiple kinds of water systems, lentic and lotic. And we don't require gear because we want MacroBlitz to be useful to programs that have gear requirements. There is a lot of good aquatic macroinvertebrate monitoring going out there, and we hope those programs that are doing that will add MacroBlitz to their work. We want to be additive rather than competitive. Now, with that all said, we do have recommendations as to the kinds of gear you should have to MacroBlitz. You will find that we don't really get into what the gear is. We're more concerned about what can it do. Just as an FYI, this photo right here, this is my MacroBlitz kit. This is what I use. Apparently, it was a pretty muddy day that I took this photo. This is just to give you an example and a place to start. You will adapt this kit so it makes sense for you and the places you work. The first kind of gear you should have is gear to collect and hold your macros. And by collect, we just mean how you're getting them out of the water. We have a whole module on collecting macroinvertebrates. We invite you to check it out. Hold is what are you going to do with your macros while they're on land? I use a D-frame net and an aquarium style net, a fine mesh aquarium style net for my collecting. I believe these nets are marketed often for brine shrimp. To hold, I use a collapsible tub. I use a collapsible tub to make it easier to transport, and also because the tub shape fits the D net shape a little better. It's easier just to dump all the D net into the tub, easier than it is a bucket, in my opinion. You need gear to pick up macros from the tub so you can look at them more closely. And I just use a white spoon and a pipette. Inexpensive and accessible. You can trim the tips of the pipette to alter it so that you have different sized openings. And if you trim it up here, that will give you a big opening to suction up the larger macros. I don't use forceps. Some of our team do. If you decide that you want to use forceps, we recommend you use entomology forceps. It makes it harder to squish your macros. In MacroBlitz, we want to return everything we take alive, and entomology forceps make it harder to squish. You will need gear to take photos. In MacroBlitz, we are about making observations of aquatic macroinvertebrates and uploading them to iNaturalist for science and for learning. Making observations really means taking photos. Here you see team member Isai taking a photo with his phone. And we have a whole module on photograph macroinvertebrates, and we talk about phones. The reason we want to, or we recommend you use your phone, again, accessibility. You absolutely can use another kind of macro photography camera if you have one. I want to point out this blue band here. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. You need gear to isolate. And by that, we mean get your macro alone so you can take its photo. We use Petri dishes because they're shallow and they're clear. Their shallowness means you can get up pretty close with your camera. You absolutely can use a clear cup or an ice cube tray. Those are very popular in aquatic macroinvertebrate monitoring circles. We recommend you have some sort of gear to measure your macros. We use the Right in the Rain index card behind the Petri dish to provide scale. You can use a metric ruler. You don't need this kind of index card. Again, this is just to give you an example. You need gear to magnify. We talk about this in depth in the photograph macroinvertebrate module. I use a clip-on lens. Remember that blue rubber band thing that was on Isai's phone a few slides back? That was also a magnification lens. We have other options. We do recommend a magnifying lens to get good quality photos for iNaturalist. You need gear to be comfortable and safe. I use a gardening stool. They're light, they're transportable. I don't always go where there's a place to sit safely or comfortably on the ground. The gardening stools have a pocket so I can stow my gear. What you need will look different depending on what your site is. Speaking of safety, if your gear includes waders, please review what to do if you fall or you step in a hole or somehow your wader gets filled with water. And since we're on the topic of safety, let's just remember that if you're in flowing water, you should be at or below your knees. If your water is going really fast, a little lower down the leg is recommended. This is team members Tanya Sulikowski. We have a lot of other safety recommendations in our companion module to get ready. So check that out. This is what I wear when I go out for macro blitzing. You can see I am comfortable. I am safe. I've got my boots. I've got long pants. I've got a long sleeve shirt that I can roll up the sleeves. So I'm pretty comfortable. I'm also keeping not just myself safe, but the macro safe. I am minimizing the amount of surface area where I need to apply insect repellent. Even the environmentally safe botanicals, it's still not a good idea to get a lot of that in the water. So while you're keeping yourself safe, think about what can you do to keep the macro safe, to keep the environment safe. So to review, this is our list: collect and hold, pick up, take photos, isolate, measure, magnify, be comfortable and safe. We hope you found this useful and interesting. We invite you to share your comments, your questions, your gear recommendations on our Google Classroom. Go to macroblitz.org for information for joining. You'll find the Gear Up module. Please feel free to comment. We'd love to hear what you're doing. Thanks for watching and happy macro blitzing.